I have lost countless hours of my life subjecting myself to bad movies, one train wreck after another, and I'm feeling a bit robbed of my finite time on Earth. The fact that I have literally no one other than myself to blame for this makes it all the more difficult to grapple with. I resent me. Of the dozens of Stephen King movies I have watched, some of them were okay. A few were really great, and most of them were god-awful abominations that couldn't hold a candle to the source material. Obvious coattail riding cash grabs from artistically bankrupt writers and directors, carnivals of bad acting and worse special effects. From blatantly irrelevant, in-name-only movies like The Lawnmower Man to half-baked wannabe summer blockbusters like The Dark Tower, constant readers have been continually let down, betrayed, and deeply disappointed by King screen adaptations over the course of decades. But sometimes, welcome as a drink of water in an otherwise arid desert. A King adaptation so rare and wonderful is gifted unto us, a film that is both true to the text and worthy of critical acclaim, a film that would go on to become iconic, beloved, revered. But it first had to fail before it would go on to stake its claim in the annals of film history. I am, of course, referring to The Shawshank Redemption. History and background. I was going to try to do the entire video in my really bad Morgan Freeman impression voice, but I'm just not that good at it, and it wouldn't make any sense with the prison guard uniform costume anyway. I am having not a great one today. This is the only chance I was going to have to record this video, so let's go. The Shawshank Redemption was released on September 23, 1994. Frank Darabont reportedly bought the rights to the film in 1987 by writing a $5,000 check directly to Stephen King. However, it is rumored that King never cashed the check and instead had it framed and returned it to Darabont along with a note which read, "In case you ever need bail money, love, Steve." Darabont wrote the screenplay for Shawshank in 1992, and 2 weeks later he had secured $25 million through Castle Rock Entertainment to produce the film. Filming began in 1993 in Ohio at the recently abandoned Ohio State Reformatory, which had been shut down due to inhumane living conditions, something I will refrain from going on an angry tangent about for now. A number of famous actors had been considered for the roles of Andy Dufresne and Red, including Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise, Kevin Costner, Harrison Ford, Johnny Depp, Nicolas Cage, and Charlie Sheen. However, it was Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman who would land the roles of Andy and Red, respectively. The movie initially did not perform well at the box office, bringing in a mere $16 million. Shawshank was up against some heavy hitters, however, and when it debuted, Shawshank found itself sandwiched in between Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump. To put things into perspective, Pulp Fiction had a budget of $8 million and grossed over $213 million, and Forrest Gump had a budget of $55 million and grossed an astounding $683 million. There were other contributing factors to Shawshank's less than favorable box office returns, including having what was considered a confusing name, lack of female characters, and the general unpopularity of prison films in the 90s. Fortunately, Shawshank saw a theatrical re-release following its 7 Academy Award nominations that awards season, which eventually increased the box office earnings to a respectable $58.3 million and allowed for the film to make a profit. Shawshank went on to be one of the most rented films on VHS that year as well. I had originally written in a tangent about how all you crazy Gen Z probably don't even know what a VHS is and Blockbuster, ha ha ha. I cut it out. I don't feel like being that funny today. Leave me alone. This is my video. What are you even doing here? Sorry. And all these years later, Shawshank can still be seen in regular rotation on the cable TV network TNT by the 6 people in the United States who still have cable. Solitary confinement. Any chance I get to address real-world issues or topics that interest me using King stories as a jumping-off point, I'm going to take it. So, much like my last video about the Shawshank novella, I'm going to be talking more about the United States justice system, prisons, and topics of that nature. I'm not doing any more book versus movie comparisons, but if that's what you're interested in, there is a link in the description from some folks who have already done a great job of that. When Andy Dufresne has an opportunity to prove his innocence and clear his name, his claims and persistent efforts are disregarded by Warden Norton. The warden has come to rely on Andy a great deal for his money laundering schemes, and he isn't at all interested in potentially losing Andy's free expert skills and services. As a result, the warden refuses to look into Andy's claims at all and dismisses him outright. Andy becomes enraged, and as a result, he is thrown into solitary confinement He is thrown into solitary confinement for a month. When his month is up, he tells Warden Norton that he is no longer going to help him run his scams, and Norton gives him another month in solitary confinement for his outburst. That's 2 consecutive months that Andy Dufresne spends in the hole, cut off from the outside world, from human contact, and from the light of day. When Andy is finally released from solitary and returns to Gen Pop, he seems, well, fine, honestly. In fact, his 2 months in solitary seem to have strengthened his resolve and instilled him with something resembling hope. However, this depiction is a far cry from the trauma that solitary confinement typically results in. Research shows that spending up to 30 days in solitary confinement can lead to psychological distress equivalent to that of being physically tortured. A number of mental health problems may result as a consequence of solitary confinement, including, but not limited to, anxiety, panic attacks, hypersensitivity to sounds and smells, problems with attention, concentration, and memory, hallucinations that affect all of the senses, poor impulse control, outbursts of violence, and increased likelihood of self-harm and suicide. In addition to the mental and psychological harm that can occur as a result of solitary confinement, studies indicate that social isolation can increase the likelihood of death by 26 to 32%. Recorded physical health effects include chronic headaches, eyesight deterioration, digestive problems, dizziness, fatigue and lethargy, loss of appetite, weight loss, and insomnia. State and federal prisons are reported to have upwards of 20% of their inmates in isolation, while local jails are slightly lower at 18%. That's a grand total of 38% of approximately 2.5 million inmates, which indicates that there is somewhere in the neighborhood of 950,000 incarcerated individuals in solitary confinement in the United States. Solitary confinement generally comes in one of 2 forms. In the case of Andy Dufresne, there is what is known as disciplinary segregation, in which inmates are temporarily placed in solitary confinement as a means of punishment for breaking rules or any variety of disruptions. The second type of solitary confinement is referred to as administrative segregation,
which is generally reserved for prisoners who are deemed to be a violent threat to the safety and well-being of other prisoners, staff members, and to themselves. Think Hannibal Lecter, or maybe Jeffrey Epstein. The ethical and moral implications of solitary confinement have been debated for years and years, but it was determined to be cruel, inhuman, or degrading, inhumane, cruel or degrading treatment or punishment under international law long ago. So maybe it's bad that the United States has nearly 1 million people in isolation at any given time. There is a strong argument to be made in favor of administrative segregation, however, and I certainly can't figure out what another option looks like. What alternatives are there for prisoners who present a nearly constant threat to themselves or those around them? Aside from the death penalty, which I am rarely, if ever, in favor of, it's not readily apparent what additional means would be effective in preventing harm both to and from the inmate in question. However, it seems reasonable that disciplinary segregation for nonviolent prisoners is a disproportionate punishment, considering the effects it can have on the mental and physical well-being of those it is imposed on. Let's try something different. Normally I would do a Is It By the Book segment in which I discuss the differences and similarities of the film and the book, and aside from some minor changes which were meaningful and impactful, yeah, I mean, Shawshank is an accurate, worthy representation of the original story. But rather than just compare the two, something plenty of people have done already, I just want to attempt to go off script for the first time and just kind of see where it takes me. There's this underlying message of hope that runs throughout Shawshank, the movie specifically. Not so much the novella. It's there, but in the film it's more pronounced. There are triumphs. And Andy, you know, he comes out of solitary confinement after 2 months, and he's just like, he's made up his mind. He's getting out of there and nothing's gonna stop him. And he's got something that a lot of, not that I'm not in solitary confinement. I'm not imprisoned. But you know, it's been a rough year, and it was, you know, 2020 was supposed to be the bad year, and then 2021 was supposed to, it was going to be the best year ever, and it hasn't been for me. So I found myself in the film just kind of resenting Andy Dufresne. Like, you're supposed to be miserable. But he had, it was money. He had money. He was so happy he was going to escape, and he had money. That was the thing he was looking forward to, and it felt kind of hollow in retrospect. Just, that was it. I mean, maybe it was more freedom, but I don't know. It felt like there was this emphasis on, I squirreled away all this money, so I'm going to escape, and then I'm going to be rich, and all my problems will be solved. And, you know, they say money can't buy happiness, and that's just not true. I mean, honestly, most Americans are, you know, one disaster away from having an empty bank account, or already can't afford an emergency. I don't know. After he came out of 2 months of solitary confinement and was just like, well, everything's going to be fine because I have money. It just, I don't know. It felt shallow, hollow. I've been doing the channel now for well over a year, and I started it during the pandemic, and I thought, man, we'll be done with this like everybody else. I thought it'd be over by now, and there have been some personal family health concerns unrelated to COVID going on, but also COVID still going on. I've been too plugged in to what's happening in the world, and then I don't know. The character of Andy, I thought to myself, you have no right to be so optimistic and so hopeful. I was spiteful. Seems so silly saying it out loud. All right, well, I've been rambling long enough now. I'm not sure I'll ever go unscripted again, but frankly, I was struggling on what the rest of this video was going to be about, and I wanted to see if I could go off script and what that would even look like, and if I was even capable of forming a coherent sentence without the words scrolling by in front of me. I can barely speak when I have a script in front of me. I'm constantly tripping over my words. Anyway, that's that segment. Final thoughts. The Shawshank Redemption was a beautifully made film. The acting, setting, score, and approach all worked so well together to create what I consider to be one of the best King screen adaptations. At least of the multitudes I've watched. Recently, it's easily in the top 3. And I'm, the horror thriller guy. I usually don't enjoy much entertainment outside of those genres, but Shawshank, the novella, and the movie both hit home in a very satisfying way. There is that thread of optimism and hope that flows through the film in particular, and maybe it's something that I need more of in my life. Like, don't get me wrong, there is plenty of doom and gloom in the story, but I should be used to that. There's nothing thrilling or unconventional about doom and gloom right now, but glimmers of hope, the possibility of escaping dire circumstances and being delivered into the arms of money, of peace, of joy. I mean, I guess we could all use a little more of that. Next week, I will be discussing Apt Pupil, a story that is devoid of joy, has no protagonist to root for, and is based on one of the greatest tragedies of all time. It's gonna be uplifting. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty please with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.